Sorry. So we're going to talk this afternoon quite a bit about General Conference and the Living Neighbor Coalition, or LINC. And I'm going to introduce you to LINC and help you to get to know some of our partners who are working together towards General Conference. And this, I hope, will help you to see how we are already beginning to work intersectionally and how we're really striving to change the church. And I want to apologize to the folks who were in the General Conference session yesterday, because I said something that I've heard taken so many different ways. So I'm just going to throw it out to you. I said, go to General Conference, be there, because we need to be there. Be there with a ton of hope and ready to work really hard to make changes. I didn't say this when I should have. But expectations, I'm not sure if I would build those up. Not because we don't think change could happen, but because the change is going to come in God's time. The work that has to happen all the time is ours now to do. So be involved. We're going to work like crazy to make the changes happen, and then we'll see. We'll see. But we're going to be there with each other and for each other and working hard. So with that said, I do want to turn to the partners of the Living Neighbor Coalition, and Walter is going to start us off.
My name is Walter Lockhart. I'm on the Council of Affirmation. Affirmation started in 1975 in the wake of the 1972 General Conference that put the incompatibility with Christian teachings language in the discipline late at night. The Gay United Methodist Caucus started, which then grew into Affirmation, and has been working to be a nonprofit, all-volunteer group that strives to be an independent voice for LGBTQI persons, speaking to the United Methodist Church as we work to provide justice and hope and change into the future.
Hey everyone, I'm Bob. Chet Christian, Executive Director of the Methodist Federation for Social Action. Our mission at MFSA is to empower clergy and laity within the United Methodist Church to take action on issues of peace, poverty, people's rights, progressive issues, and justice within the United Methodist Church. That last part, justice within the United Methodist Church, has been a strong focus of the MFSA ever since that General Conference in 1976 and beyond. And so that is what we bring, along with Affirmation, is some of that history of General Conference work. A lot of our gifts that we bring into this is legislative work, but also the intersectionality that we heard about today.
I'm a lot shorter than everyone else. Hi, I'm Bridget Cabrera. I'm the Deputy Director of the Reconciling Ministries Network. RMN mobilizes United Methodists of all sexual orientations, gender identities, to transform our church and world into Christ-inclusive love. Now, we are so proud to be in coalition with all these amazing partners, and RMN, along with our partnership with the coalition, will continue to witness to biblical obedience before, during, and after General Conference. Thanks.
I'm Cedric Bridgeforth, and I serve as the chair of Black Methodists for Church Renewal. And Black Methodists for Church Renewal's mission is to raise up prophetic and spiritual leaders who will be advocates for the unique needs of Black people in the United Methodist Church. Our vision is for a renewed, transformed, and united body of Christ, where we value the development of leaders, we value our Wesleyan heritage, we value full inclusion in the church.
I'm even shorter. My name is Debbie McDonald, and I'm one of the national co-chairs for the United Methodist Association of Ministers with Disabilities. And we advocate for and assist those who are in ministry and those who want to be in ministry. And at the General Conference this year, we have 5 petitions that are dealing with removing or ensuring non-discrimination against people with disabilities in the ordination process, asking for equality in hiring people with disabilities, and trying to remove some of the languaging that was put in last time that discriminates against people with disabilities when it comes to our insurance and being on disability pension itself. So those are some of the things that we're doing. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Perez. I represent Marcha, Methodist Associates representing the cause of Hispanic Latino Americans. And it's the National Hispanic Caucus. Our purpose is to advocate and affirm the dignity of Hispanic Latinos inside the church and outside the church. And we also provide spaces for theological reflection, training and advocacy, and also to make sure that we have leaders who are ready to advocate for our issues as well. Some of the issues and petitions that we're going to bring to our General Conference are related to immigration. Some of them are relationship with Latin America, especially Cuba and Puerto Rico. And also, we are trying to work very hard for the last years to be in the inter-ethnic, the racial ethnic groups. And I'm very, very happy to be here today as the Vice President of Marcha, because we joined 3 years ago in the coalition. And in the midst of all the things that are going on in our church, we want to make sure that we are a church that is inclusive. And I heard that the chicken crossed the river because she wanted to join the coalition.
I'm Amy DeLong. I represent Love Prevails, and we are a wee little band of riffraff. Stop, I only have 30 seconds. We're trying to really have an outsized effect on this blasted, beloved church that we all love so much. We travel around the country largely on our own dime, and we witness to the faithfulness of LGBTQ people in the church. At Love Prevails, we ask people to disclose, to divest, and to disrupt. To disclose means that we come out of the closet and we refuse to ever go back in. And if you think I'm just talking to the queer folks right now, you're wrong. We need to know that we're all in the closet and we need to come out. To divest means that we withdraw our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness from those structures within the United Methodist Church that support the status quo and which is more worried about institutional preservation than it is about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then we take those resources and we reinvest them and we redirect them and into efforts that are aimed at ending the categorical discrimination against LGBTQ people. And finally, we disrupt. And that means that we will undermine and dismantle the systems of oppression and injustice that are denying or limiting the full inclusion of LGBTQ people and are strangling the life out of this church and which are killing LGBTQ people body and soul. And for Christ's sake, Love Prevails asks that we not sit around and wait for someone to give us permission to do those things.
My name is Frank Wolf. I'm the convener of the Western Methodist Justice Movement. We are an organization that was founded after the 2012 Western Jurisdictional Conference. Bishop Hagi at that conference said, the jurisdiction doesn't have the resources to be able to do everything, so take that authority and do what needs to be done. And so Western Methodist Justice Movement was a group of people that came together to say that we're going to do what needs to be done. And we've been working at that in the West primarily, but our interests go far broader than that over the last several years. We describe ourselves as providing a venue where progressive persons of faith residing primarily in the Western United States work together on significant issues of justice and peace, both within and beyond the United Methodist Church. And our work is primarily done through what we call action networks, people who come together with passion around various issues that are facing the church, LGBT issues, justice in the Philippines, criminal justice, reproductive rights. These are just a few of the various issues. Palestinian rights that the Western Methodist Justice Movement is working to organize people around and get people working, not just in the church, but also in the wider society. But at times, it means pushing the church to do what it is the church is really called to do. So thanks very much.
There were three other of our coalition partners who couldn't be with us, couldn't have representation here, but on their behalf, they've each asked me to send their best wishes to you all and to thank you for the work that you're doing with them in coalition. They're the National Federation of Asian American United Methodists, PINCA, which is the Pacific Islanders Caucus of the United Methodist Church, and the Native American International Caucus. And I want to mention something about the Native American International Caucus. When we first started talking about where this event was going to take place, we were actually looking at Atlanta. And the Native American International Caucus group said to us, that's fine, but no, we just can't be supportive of it in any way because of the breaks. And we all did a face palm. And then we talked in the coalition, and that's when the focus became San Antonio. And I remember early in the conversations, people saying, who's not good at San Antonio in August? You are amazing. When we started yesterday, at the beginning of the general conference sessions, the workshops that I was a part of leading with Kevin Nelson, I asked the question, who is Link? Who knows? And a few hands went up, but not many. And I said, well, what if I asked it this way? Who is the Love Your Neighbor Coalition? Well, then a lot more hands went up, but still not everyone. So I want you to know who Link is and what we're about. Link is an evolution of the coalition that's been working together for a number of years. I just put up our mission statement, who we say we are, but I want to just read what we agreed to as coalition partners. We agreed to work together around the intersections of common justice issues and shared values that our individual partner organizations represent. And if you were just listening to all of who we represent now as a coalition, it's pretty amazing and it's a pretty daunting task. But think of the numbers of people that are now working together that have never worked together in this way before. And it's very exciting. So I've asked Cedric Bridgeforth, the chair of the board of BMCR, Black Methodist Church, to share a little bit more about the coalition and his organization.
Thank you, Steve. And just so you know, my heart is pounding, my hands are shaking, and my knees are a little wobbly right now. So I solicit your prayers. For real.
As I shared during the time of introduction, the mission for Black Methodist for Church Renewal is to raise up prophetic and spiritual leaders who will be advocates for the unique needs of Black people in the United Methodist Church. And a little more than a decade or so ago, Marilyn McGee Talbert worked with the board of BMCR to help unpack that mission statement and to go a little deeper. And out of that work came the vision of a renewed, transformed, and united body of Christ. Also out of that work came some stated core values. More than a decade ago, we value commitment to developing prophetic and spiritual leaders. We value our legacy, the history, the persons and events which shaped our foundation. We value our Wesleyan heritage. We value connectivity and relationships, and we value inclusiveness. And when I first came to Black Methodist for Church Renewal and I read those core values, I got excited deep down within my soul. And then when the invitation and the opportunity came for BMCR to be a part of this coalition, I got even more excited. And as the work continues, so does the excitement. The Black Methodist for Church Renewal is a part of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition because the coalition helps us live out our mission. It deepens our values and brings into view the great vision we have for a renewed, transformed, and united body of Christ. We see the need for Black Methodists for Church Renewal to be in relationship with the various partners of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition, because each of us have issues and strengths that each one can benefit from. We see being together and working together not only as the best way, but as the only way to advance the greatest call to discipleship and care within and beyond the church. We are partners with the Love Your Neighbor Coalition because of the new space created within the coalition. And what is meant by this is probably best described in this way. For when you invite me to your table, often I am expected, or at least I will try, to conform to your rules, to your norms, to your language, to your agenda, and any other thing that may aid in my inclusion at your table. The same is true when I invite you to what is presumed to be my table. So we see being a part of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition as bringing tables together. Each one brings their passions, interests, strengths, and norms. And by joining tables together, we are intentional about creating new and equitable space where no one is ridiculed for what they bring to the table, and no one is forced to give up any unique perspective or principle. But we join together and work from our common core and our purpose. This General Conference cycle, we have all 5 racial ethnic caucuses as partners within the coalition. I've limited time, so. We are coalition partners because we see that injustice in any form is an assault on humanity everywhere. As racial ethnic caucuses, we tend to focus on racial injustices, but we see that injustice requires no preceding qualifier. We are learning the language and value of working in the intersections of who we are together. For me, this work is deeply personal and is borne out in my own life's narrative. When I was 10, my parents divorced, and I had to change schools. When I arrived in my new 6th grade class, the person who welcomed me was a boy named Lynn. At the time, he wore glasses, and I did not. At the time. We were about the same height and build. He was white, I was not. We were about the same height and build. He was white, I was not. I wanted a particular reaction there. I didn't get it, so I thought I'd try. And I had to get it that way. Okay. We were both reared in the church and active in our respective youth groups. We were both from marginally middle-class families. We were both well-versed in the southernness of our beings. He played football, I was in the band. He liked to read, I did not. Oh, there it is. We were both outgoing and had sort of big personalities. And at age 14, his parents divorced. And it was then my turn to welcome him into the world of being a kid from a divorced home. Much in the same way he had extended hospitality to me when I arrived at my new school, parents freshly divorced. At age 15, I discovered I needed glasses, and Lynn walked me through that adjustment. At age 16, his dad bought him a car. Mine did not. And you think that's funny? During our 11th grade year at Danville High School in Danville, Alabama, we decided we would try out for the cheerleading squad. I'll tell you about that another time. At age 18, he enlisted in the Army, and I enlisted in the Air Force. We went into adulthood, connecting a few times a year to catch up here and there, but over time we lost touch with one another. In February 2009, he died. I did not. Yeah, you didn't laugh. In fact, it was in 2009 that I began to really live out loud. To live a life that was no longer in shadows or in silence. One conversation Lynn and I never had verbally, but was known to each of us, was that we shared many things in common. One of which was our desire for a fulfilled life. Another was a love that penetrated the boundaries established by our bigoted foreparents. Another commonality was our sexual orientation. We never talked about it, but we knew. We protected each other, we welcomed each other, and we never coerced or bullied one another to be anything other than a friend. I find this working coalition to be similar to that of my relationship with Lynn. We just brought who we were, what we wanted, and what we envisioned to the relationship and hoped for the best. We were broken at times and accepted one another and worked together to bring about as much wholeness as we possibly could. Those around us did not always understand it. Sometimes we were also at a loss for what to do, but we knew we could do anything together. Our racial identity will never change. Our sexual orientation will never change. What our parents did or did not do will never change. But the systems put in place to keep us apart can change. They must change, and they will change. And I am coming to understand and to live out that principle and that hope more and more within this coalition of justice and equity seekers that we now know as the Love Your Neighbor Coalition. Thank you. My legs are a little wobbly too today, so I asked a good friend of mine, Becky Burrell, to kind of help me out. Reverend Story reminded us Thursday night that while we know that the end of the story is love wins, and it is, we also realize that we are still on the journey together, and we haven't arrived yet.
We were reminded then and yesterday and definitely this morning. The cost of the journey is great in terms of the continued hurt and suffering that so many endure along the way.
I work out of MFSA's office in Washington, D.C. And there's a saying that we often throw around the office to each other, especially when one of us finds ourselves in a moment of incredible frustration, anxiousness, anger, and hurt because of something some church leader or some lunatic politician said or did that we know is going to harm, exclude, or further marginalize others. Chet will often say, remember, Steve, it's not just a moment, it's a movement. It gets me out of my head, out of that moment, the moment of anger. It helps me to refocus on the journey, the big picture. Yes, sometimes Chet really is a God-sent angel to others. I am still trying to get my head around the new dress code, though. I also, you wait, but I also realize it is those moments that ignite our passion for justice. There's the moments that help to motivate us to keep moving forward. They become the manna for the journey. So I'd like to share a little bit about the moments of the movement that have brought the Love Your Neighbor Coalition to this moment now. But I'd like to do it on both a personal and a movement level. I guess the best place to start is 1984. That was the year that the General Conference in Baltimore added to the Book of Discipline the provision against the ordination or appointment of self-avowed practicing homosexuals. It was also the year that Affirmation decided to launch a ministry program that they'd actually been working on for 2 years. the Reconciling Congregations program was brought to life. And Mark Bowman and Beth Richardson began to serve as volunteer co-coordinators in developing the RCP. Where's Mark? I decided, in all fairness, that if I was going to throw up an 80s picture of Mark, I'd also throw up an 80s picture of myself. 1984 was a pivotal year for me as well. I was getting married that year, starting my senior year of college, heading toward the ministry in the United Methodist Church, and I was absolutely clueless about the incredible harm my church had just done to gay and lesbian clergy across the denomination. Well, what a difference a year can make. Because by 1985, RCP already had 9 congregations who had stepped up publicly to become reconciling. I got to meet some incredible people at seminary who had changed my life and views of ministry, God's love, grace, and justice, and even God's call on my life forever. And those are some of those folks. One person in particular would become a moment in my movement that has never left me. Dan was a first-year seminarian who was just coming to a place of acceptance that he was gay, is gay. I was in the beginning phases of being a recovering homophobe who was just coming to a place where I knew I needed to learn a whole lot more about life and change what I had always thought and been taught about homosexuals. Together at Drew Seminary, we found this group on campus called Drew People Concerned that was dealing with issues of human sexuality in the United Methodist Church. By our final year in seminary in 1988, Dan and I were co-leading that group. We started a library on campus, a Wednesday evening worship service, and you have to know there was a PhD student on campus who was one of our favorite go-to preachers, someone named Karen Oliveto. We had awesome worship. We even got the school to begin to wrestle about becoming a reconciling in seminary, but they didn't do it. 1988 was also a general conference year, and a group of us found ourselves in St. Louis, experiencing the broader Connectional Church.
There was great hope at General Conference in St. Louis in 1988 as the denomination decided to form a study committee on homosexuality. And the far-right agenda, known as the Houston Declaration. Houston? Well, that's what it says here in the script. Houston Declaration. In 1988, I was 9. The Houston Declaration gained little traction. However, the incompatibility language and ordination bans still remained in the Book of Discipline. We, the church, the movement, experienced a meanness in St. Louis, in the church, that we didn't expect. After General Conference, Steve and his cohorts went back to finish classes and prepared to graduate and head off into different annual conferences and churches. They were excited and scared to death.
But I also noticed something else that began to happen. It was happening between Dan and myself in terms of our friendship. It became strained, really strained, and I didn't understand it. And just days before graduation, I just couldn't take it anymore, so I kind of cornered him and confronted him to find out what was going on. That moment is still seared in my memory, and I mean that. Dan looked at me and said, "Steve, my people are dying out there." This was 1988. "I have to do something to help them," he went on. "And Steve, you're going to acquiesce because you can. Because that's going to be where all the pressure is going to lead you." I was shocked. I was devastated. I was deathly afraid he wouldn't be right. But over the next few moments of what was a really awkward silence, I began to hear Dan's words not as condemnation, but as challenge. "Dan," I said, "I pray to God you're wrong, I hope you'll stay in touch, we'll stay in touch, and you'll keep an eye on me and the ministry that I'm involved in. Call me out if I begin to start to acquiesce. I know your people are dying, but you have to realize my people are doing the killing. And I need to help them stop. We saw each other one more time a few weeks after graduation. We lost touch for a number of years. Then we kind of found each other thanks to Facebook. And we actually met up again for the first time since a couple weeks after seminary at the Tabernacle in 2012 in Tampa.
That comes later in the story. By 1989, there were 37 reconciling congregations, and Affirmation decided it was time for the Reconciling Congregations program to become an autonomous group. Under the continued leadership of Mark Bowman as executive director, the witness of the Reconciling Congregations program continued to grow, and so did the movement. By General Conference 1992, hopes were very high, and the study committee's report on homosexuality very clearly pointed to a much-needed removal of the incompatibility language from the Book of Discipline. While the report was received by the denomination and put out by the publishing house, no official changes were made to the discriminatory language in the Book of Discipline. In 1993, Affirmation, MFSA, and RCP testified before the General Commission on General Conference concerning moving the 1996 General Conference out of Denver, Colorado, because of Colorado's Amendment 2, which banned laws that would protect gay and lesbian people from discrimination. This was most likely the first emergence of the coalition. The Commission decided not to move GC in 1996, but to provide a witness while there. In 1994, these three groups are again invited by the Commission to talk about witness at General Conference. Well, the Reconciling Congregations program began to plan their own witness for GC in 1996, and through the work of Reverend Greg Dell, AMAR took the first initials from Affirmation, MFSA, and Reconciling Congregations program and formed as the first true coalition, working at General Conference to help open the doors to everyone. The United Methodist Church, however, voted to add a ban on same-sex unions. In 1996, RCP broke the 100 congregation mark and ended the year with 118 reconciling congregations. A group of students at the United Methodist Student Forum reacted to the continued homophobia in the church by forming Methodist Students for an All-Inclusive Church, Mosaic, and established a national leadership team. Many of those early leaders in Mosaic are now leaders across the coalition. In March of 1998, the Reverend Jimmy Creech was put on trial for conducting a union service for two women at First UMC Omaha, and the era of church trials began.
At General Conference in 2000, the Common Witness Coalition brought the call to the United Methodist Church to recognize that wide is God's welcome, asking the United Methodist Church to extend the table to LGBTQ United Methodists. Cleveland was an incredibly emotional General Conference. If you were there, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you for your witness there. Along with other groups like Soul Force that showed up, 200 people were arrested on the Wednesday of the second week of General Conference, the plenary week. And on Thursday, the next morning after the conference reached an impasse and voted negatively on just the truth of differing views in the church, the Common Witness Reconciling Congregation, made up of Reconciling Congregations Program, Affirmation, and MFSA, came onto the floor of conference to protest the continuing exclusion of GLBT persons in the United Methodist Church. 29 people were arrested off of the floor. See, 2012 wasn't the first time. Within the year in GC 2000, the Reconciling Congregations Program became RMN, the Reconciling Ministries Network. In 2004, at General Conference in Pittsburgh, the Common Witness Coalition was watermarked, the Ministry of Assurance, focusing on the radical equality that comes with everyone's baptismal promise. A promise which we believe required the removal of exclusionary language. Hundreds of supporters wore rainbow stoles introduced by the Parents Reconciling Network. Volunteers handed out water bottles with our watermark stamp, the logo on them. Again, we worked to have discriminatory language removed and legislation designed to at least agree to disagree was even introduced to the United Methodist Church, and they refused again to budge.
In 2008, in Fort Worth, Texas, under the banner of A Future with Hope for the 2008 General Conference, Reconciling United Methodists proclaimed hope in Christ, envisioning one family tree that thrives as persons of all sexual orientations and gender identities make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. This was also the year we began to ask the church to join us in the understanding that in faith and in membership, all means all, or even now as we say, y'all means all. And without it, slogans like open hearts, open minds, open doors became more of an embarrassment of false advertising than anything else. For 4 General Conference sessions, the now Common Witness Coalition had developed a pattern for their engagement with the General Conference of the United Methodist Church. MFSA, Affirmation, and RMN would do their own work for 3 years, just after each General Conference, and then near the beginning of year 4, they would begin to come together and gear up for General Conference. Affirmation would continue to take the lead in providing nurture and spiritual care for the coalition at General Conference, for those who were wounded by the church and needed support. RMN would work on witness and worship events for the coalition presence as a powerful reminder of the harm the church was doing to our LGBTQ siblings, and yet the hope we still had for the church and its future. MFSA would take the lead on monitoring and tracking legislation and providing inspirational and educational forums for delegates and our volunteers, like the luncheon speakers held during the days of General Conference. MFSA also took on the role of providing housing for the growing numbers of volunteers who came to help work for change in the United Methodist Church. Now, along with RMN's 5-year Call to Witness program, working toward 2012, and developing an outreach to move the hearts and minds of delegates to the General Conference, the stage was set for the coalition to evolve yet again.
In the fall of 2010, through a generous grant that RMN helped MFSA to obtain, the 3 Common Witness partners decided that they wanted to grow the coalition beyond themselves, to begin to build relationships around the intersections of oppression and marginalization all across the United Methodist Church. In January 2011, I was hired to act as the coalition coordinator. Together, RMN, MFSA, and Affirmation came together in Chicago early in 2011, decided that the theme and witness for General Conference 2012 for the coalition would be based on the name of this newly forming coalition and the scriptural passage that was and informs its core beliefs. The Love Your Neighbor Coalition was born. With just 1 year to go before GC 2012, Link had to work fast on a number of areas. The original partners went into many of their traditional roles preparing for the last General Conference.
By February of 2012, just 3 months before the start of General Conference, enough inter-caucus dialogue, vision, trust, and hope had begun to develop that Black Methodists for Church Renewal became Link's first new partner to join the original 3. Within another month, both the Native American International Caucus and the National Federation of Asian American United Methodists became partners. While GC 2012 was a great disappointment again, in that the church refused to remove the discriminatory language again, we did see a number of positive steps in other areas. We helped to stave off some other very bad and harmful legislation, and Link was an integral part of stopping the changes in church structure which would have given virtual control of the resources and direction of ministry to a small number of very non-diverse people in the United Methodist Church. Our witness was powerful, even though our hurt and disappointment felt greater than ever. It was in our tabernacle at General Conference 2012 that the grassroots movement of clergy standing up for marriage equality within United Methodist annual conferences became, by the words of Bishop Talbert, the biblical obedience campaign of RMN. Since GC 2012, Link has been joined by the other 5 partners that you were introduced to earlier. We are growing stronger, more diverse, more intersectional, and more determined than ever.
In 2012, the tabernacle became a very powerful symbol for me, as it did for many others. This is where I finally got to reconnect with Dan from seminary when we stopped by one afternoon and I took some time off and we went and grabbed lunch together. I got to thank him for being that voice in my head that's always there that says, Steve, you're going to acquiesce. And I respond, hell no. Dan didn't have a clue that he had always been there for me, even when we weren't there for each other over the years. Dan was no longer a United Methodist clergy person. He'd been a part of a reconciling conference before that was not allowed. But that reconciling conference, quite frankly, put their crosshairs on Dan, and so he moved on. But he didn't turn away from his calling as a result. He's now a Presbyterian pastor, serving in the North Central conferences of the United Methodist Church these days. It's one of those stories that just keeps playing over and over in my own head and heart and is a touchstone for me. But there were others that happened at General Conference 2012, and I'd like to share one last story from the tabernacle, if you will. And I'm not even sure if the person whose story this is here. So if you want to raise your hand, please do. One day, one of our volunteers came back into the tabernacle. I was the only other person in there, and they were just sobbing. And so I went over to see what was going on. And she said she had just come from the Starbucks. She had an afternoon meeting with the barista at the Starbucks. She'd been in earlier in the day, and the young man behind the counter said, "What's that about?" Pointing at her stole. And she explained while she was standing in line what it was about. And he was like, "That's cool." So she took it off and gave it to him. He said, "Oh, I can take next to him. I have another one. I know where they are." He said, "Can you come back this afternoon around 2? Because I have a break then." And she said, "Okay." And she did. And when she came back, he came out from behind the counter and just threw himself in her arms and said, "I want to thank you. You're saving my life." He goes, "You don't know how many times I thought about taking you, and how many times the church has not been there for me. But you all, you're here for me. Thank you." We become church in the very places where the General Conference won't. That is the power of our witness. Those are the moments of our movement. And we don't know what the next moment will bring. But what we do know is that we will be there to share the really good news of God's inclusive grace and love, to share a word of hope for our United Methodist Church, to share a prophetic witness for justice for all of God's people. And with us, all really does mean all. Thank you. So someone else is going to share a moment with you and then lead you in a process together. Richard, thanks.
We have heard it said today that every movement is made up of moments that challenge and inspire us to action. Mine's covenant of conscience and later Bishop Calvert's call to biblical obedience was and are some of those moments for me. The call to United Methodists to no longer agree to be bound by an unjust law invites us to live into God's love, God's law of love right now. We can't wait for a policy change to do the right thing. Every moment that we choose biblical obedience over fear, we continue to build the momentum for this movement. And what truly inspires me is you. The congregations and the lay people and the clergy that live into biblical obedience every single day. You that choose love over fear. You that choose bravery and grace and love. So I ask you, what is your moment in this movement? What inspired you to action? Turn to your neighbor and share.
I come though. That is so embarrassing. But I miss it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my I think that it might be a next step. Doing that one. How much somehow that is.
If your neighbor hasn't had a chance to share, I invite you to invite your neighbor to share.
know, it's like always miserable when you're not. It's really not. But it's usually not. Yeah. Very nice. And one of my good friends, Plenary, also. That's all I can say. Wow. It's working for me right now. I'm taking a break. I'm on taking a break. I took a month off. I'm taking a month off. Here's my lesson. And a couple things about it. So like, school. I write for school. I made a plan. I'm going to put mine
My apologies for my language in the last part of the presentation because I meant to say heaven now. Really. So, on this journey of moments in the movement, it's always powerful to stop and to remember the saints of our lives, the people who inspire us and continue to inspire us to do the work. But we can't stay in the memories. We have to keep moving forward. And so I want to talk now with you about what the Love Your Neighbor Coalition does at General Conference. And I have some help from some of the folks who are leading us in those areas. Lisette Perez and Kevin Nelson are heading up our Love Your Neighbor Coalition legislative strategy team, and they're going to share some things with you.
So I'm Kevin Nelson, and this is Lisette Perez, and we co-chair the legislative strategy team for the Love Your Neighbor Coalition. And to give you a little bit of a sense of our work, let me put in my own words a framework for what's going on at General Conference and the framework within which we work. And so, in my own words, I see General Conference as a place where we see or experience struggles over power, ideals, and beliefs. And those struggles are taking place by forces for love in action, right belief, and institutionalism. And with those struggles and those forces in mind, they're played out through legislative debate and legislative action. And so as we get to General Conference and go through this whole process of legislation, that's the framework through which I see what's happening there. And with that out of mind, let me turn to Lisette.
I just want to share with you some of the major issues that are going to be presented or during general conference, and it's important for us to understand at least these five. Inclusion, that's an issue. And what that means is where we fit people who are not white, male, straight, and over 45 years old. I mean, are we part of the church or not? So inclusion is extremely important because part of our theology, means as part of our DNA as Methodists that we are an inclusive church, So that's one of them. And human sexuality is another issue in terms of heterosexism and reproductive matters, and we heard some of that in the panel previously. So that is extremely important to us, and we are paying attention to that. Judicial process, that is connected as well because we want to make sure that we have a fair process and we learn how to manage power through the physical, office and other places in the church. And distributive justice and judicial counsel. So how we manage power as people, people who are called United Methodists, and we're trying to serve our communities. Of course, how we do that, the church structure, that is another important issue, because that says how we manage the power and how we get to the places that we want to be as a church. So global, national, and regional structure, there's some ideas that have been presented, and we have to pay attention to that because it has some impact of what we're trying to do. And of course, money, how we deal with money, with a church that is not growing as we want to and is not getting as much as we want to for all the work that we need to do. So those are 5 important issues, and how we get to those, how we're going to manage to deal with all these legislations and resolutions that are going to be presented related to those issues. Well, first, we need to make sure that we have a good relationship with our delegates, and I'm very glad that we have some delegates here present. And you are the river, the new water, the river that is going to try to transform. Amen? Amen. Well, we have to reach out to others as well, other people that are willing to be part of that movement. And in building relationship, we become a resource, trying to make sure that all the delegates know and understand and interpret well those issues with providing some talking points and some backgrounds and talking about our moments and our stories. So somehow the river can transform the waters. No? And in doing that, we understand that we heard before that this is not a single issue, but it's all of the issues together. Anything that relates to not including people in our church, it's something that is important. So we have to work together and see all the different legislation that the different partners have and to support them as well. To work together with some strategies and watching for those petitions that will make a negative impact in our legislations and resolutions as well. So that is extremely important. That's part of the work. And Harry told me, I don't know if people are going to like us at the end of the general conference. I'm just counting on everyone's prayer because I think prayer is extremely important in this process. I believe in prayer. And I also heard, I forgot to mention that before, that when the chicken crossed the river, she said, "Sí se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede."
One of the other very powerful witnesses of things that we do together as a coalition is witness, and Joey Lopez and David Meredith are going to share some things about witness. They're heading up our witness for the coalition.
I say Portland, you say witness. Portland, witness. Portland, witness. Portland, witness. I say GC, you say we'll see. GC, we'll see. GC, we'll see. GC, we'll see. I'm David Meredith, and pleased to serve in this capacity. I'm
also a gay United Methodist elder serving under. My name is Joey Lopez. I'm from Western North Carolina, and I serve on the board of directors of the Methodist Federation for Social Action. And as a delegate to the last General Conference, I'm glad to be here to be thinking about what our presence will be at General Conference in 2016. Our work and the work of the coalition leading up to General Conference is intersectional, including but not limited to LGBT inclusion in the church. In fact, the coalition is actually many voices, many languages, and many perspectives. In 2012, the coalition did incredible work organizing around legislation that was presented before the General Conference and responding to the growing pains of injustice within the church and world. This work manifested in many ways, one being its witness. The coalition helped to coordinate events to draw attention to a wide range of oppression our church is directly and indirectly a part of. There was an immigration rally featuring an address by Bishop Furcano, candlelight visual for Trayvon Martin, and collaboration with Love Prevails to cross the bar General Conference to celebrate in the act of communion following the vote to retain LGBT exclusive language in the Book of Discipline. Leading into 2016, the coalition team will be using empathic resistance, a tactic coined by Jasmine Beach Ferrara of the Campaign for Southern Equality, a guiding principle for our presence at General Conference. This practice of empathic resistance is to maintain one's own dignity and sacred worth while having empathy and compassion for those who are oppressing you. Through my work of organizing for the lived equality of LGBT people in the South, I hold this principle by constantly asking myself, how can I be transformed by this relationship? This leads me to think about the history of our church. The language of our discipline changed about people of color in the church, but we continue to seek reconciliation for our soiled past and present. The language of our discipline changed about women in the pulpit, but there is still work to do for equitable compensation and roles of leadership within our church for women. The language will eventually change about queer people in the life of the church, but where will we be positioned to continue our work of liberation? Before General Conference comes around, some questions that the witness team that Joey and I co-chair for the Love Your Neighbor Coalition will be asking as we select and prepare for witness events. These are just some of the questions. How does the coalition balance an invitation with relationship to folks who are seeking, learning, and unsure of supporting some of the work that we are all engaged in, while at the same time creating space for righteous anger for the harm the church has caused and is causing by its silence and by its action? We will be asking the question, how does the coalition do a witness that opens the door for some, but doesn't slam the door on dialogue with others? We're going to ask the question, how is our privileged American position of how we do stuff gonna feel? How's an African delegate gonna hear and experience what we do? How is the moderate Southern delegate, some who are among us, going to hear and experience this? And how is the person sitting at home watching from live stream General Conference unfold, how are they going to hear and experience what we do? These are hard questions. We don't have the answers, but these are the questions our team will ask ourselves about every witness event
that we planned. In addition, we have to figure out with our coalition partners, what are we asking for? And who are we asking it of? How does the coalition, our coalition, build the relational and organizational power to counterbalance the powers of the institutional church? In addition, how do we recognize that the United Methodist Church and its institutional power are not monolithic, but in fact pluralistic? That there are many sources of power in this decision-making organization. So to whom or to where do we direct our witness events and actions, and what are we asking in those places? I'll give you a quick for instance. If we really want a central conference in Côte d'Ivoire to begin to create a safe space for GLBTI members of their church or residents in their communities, can we direct an ask just to the central conference delegates from Côte d'Ivoire and develop a way for them to be held accountable with us, to us, for us, for the lives of those people in their community? That's different than demanding the General Conference. It's a focused ask. It's about where is the power to make this change. And we can ask this of a whole host of other groups within the United Methodist Church. It requires that we also figure out how do we get a system of accountability that folks answer back to us. That what we ask gets answered, and folks are held accountable for it. And then we have an ask of you, because we can't get there as a coalition unless we build relational, organizational capacity and power to ask these questions and to make folks face us and face us down with these questions. So we need y'all to show up. We need y'all to be there in Portland. We need you to be present live stream or by phone or in your conversation with delegates and folks from your own annual conference. We cannot get there if we do not have broad, relational, coalitional, organizational capacity. So moving forward from this space today, we do have options. We can measure our success moving forward by moments of legislative gain. And we hope we have some. We can also measure our success by whether we stay or leave General Conference victorious or disappointed. And
we can measure our success through the movement building. Through the movement building. Through building a relational and inclusive, no liberated body of Christ within our church for transformation in the world.
We say Portland, you say witness. Portland,
witness.
Portland,
witness.
GC,
we'll
GC,
we'll see.
Walter is going to come up and talk about another very important aspect that you shared, and that's really the care and support of one another at General Conference.
Is anybody here excited? Does anybody here have something passionate that they want to have changed at General Conference? I've heard people talking about Palestine. I've heard people talking about gender identity. I've heard people talking about respecting one another, rights for women, rights for people of various ethnic backgrounds. And you know what? I can get passionately excited about almost everything that has been mentioned here. And one of the things that I have a problem when I get passionately excited is I'm not always gentle with the people who are around me. Can I get an amen from those who know me? Okay. All right. I remember my first general conference sitting in Denver, sitting up for hours and hours and hours in the back room, talking to each other, trying to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to get along and building the relationship